Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. Getting my shows blended together. I got a couple of opening announcements. One, at the end of this show, I have to run down to the local dog pound, the city dog pound, to pick up a dog that I got from them a week or so ago, and a little bit of a gnarly story with that. They did some surgery on this dog, and then they had to remove one of his eyes because it was infected. We picked up this dog from a dog pound. He was a rescue, and we were picking him up on the day that they were going to have killed him. So we go in to foster him. And when they do the surgery, they put a cone on it. You've seen those dogs, they put the cones on, and then they say that the cone has to stay there for 10 days. So we have to keep this dog in isolation from the other dogs and have to keep the cone on it. But what they did, and we didn't know this, was that they put the cone on not the way they're supposed to put the cone on. They put the cone on with a cord around the dog's neck. Of course, we have no idea about this, and so we go to my wife decides that she's going to try to wash the dog. She's going to inspect it. He's constantly itching at his neck, and then she's realized that that this cone has to come off. That it's causing a problem. When she pulls the cone off, she realizes that cord that was not supposed to be on there has actually cut through. And here we are. We're rushing down to the dog pound with this gash in this dog, and then we have to turn it over to the dog pound and say, hey, you guys got to fix this. We're only fostering. We're not adopting yet. And the pound says that they can't do anything about it, that they're just going to turn it over to us if we want to adopt it, and we can take it to a vet and get the injury fixed that they caused. So that's what we're going to do. Sorry to open with such a horrible story, but if anybody wants to help with the vet bill on this, I'll put my link to my PayPal down below, because I don't know what we're going to be facing with that. The second announcement, we've got a new guy on the panel, as you can see. This is Mark Peralta. Am I saying that right? Mark Peralta? All right, so I met him at a local Dallas brewery a couple weeks back, and when he started telling me his background before he all of the training that he had done in the Bible before he came away and realized that it's not something to be believed, I thought, well, with this kind of a background, you really belong on this show. So, Mark, welcome aboard, and please tell us a little bit about that background.
You're muted. Mark, you're muted.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you everyone for inviting me to the show. I'm a fan of the show, and so it's just a privilege to be here. In terms of my background, I grew up Catholic, but then as an adult became an evangelical Christian, where I obeyed the calling to go to Bible college. And so I got a undergraduate and a master's of arts in biblical studies from Dallas Theological Seminary, a very fundamentalist, very large seminary in the Dallas area. That's known in the evangelical world as one of those that's pumping out, academics and ministers for, the Christ cult. There I learned essentially the whole Christian Bible, Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, and the New Testament, both with the Hebrew and the corresponding Greek, the Koine Greek. Had 5 semesters of each language. And then post seminary, I have spent, the large part of, the last 5 years or so researching more into like the other ancient Near Eastern myths, like the Babylonian myths, like the Egyptian myths. Now I'm getting into some of the Canaanite stuff that I've been able to kind of realize gradually that, hey, it doesn't seem like the Hebrew Bible, it's all that original. And there are other things out there that, made me question. And so I deconverted. And now, last year, my wife and I started a podcast where we are essentially anti-apologists. We are criticizing fundamentalism, and we're bringing to the conversation perhaps a lot of the liberal, I used to consider, or liberal scholarship back in the day to bring new light to some of these biblical issues and questions and all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, so that's my background.
So you were at the Dallas Theological
Mhm.
Seminary, and I was there. I remember I was there one day where I chanced upon John Mark Reynolds, who he and I had I wouldn't call it an interesting conversation. He was just spouting postmodernism at me, telling me that there's no such thing as a fact
Mm.
because nothing can ever be objectively verifiable. Therefore, everybody's belief is equally valid. It was the first time I'd
Mhm.
ever heard anybody use that excuse.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that was one of those criticisms that were going around while I was in seminary. It was a high critique of postmodernism and that kind of stuff.
How is it a critique if they're using it?
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of contradictory approaches with Christianity that I found.
Gotcha. Okay. So we're doing Deuteronomy 6. Anybody want to give us a prologue of what to expect here?
Mark, did
Yeah.
you ever pastor a church?
I did, yeah. I was an associate pastor for kind of a mega church in the DFW, and did that for about a year until I was let go, and it was a weird experience. And if you want to know more about it, I've
never a
shared
head
that.
pastor. Were you a speaker at all?
So I preached from time to time. I was more like the second to preach after the main guy, but I mostly ran with like the operations, leading the teams of volunteers, production stuff.
Yeah, Dallas has a handful of
Mhm.
mega churches, and they're kind of alarming in that these are like football stadium sanctuaries.
Mhm.
They're
Yeah.
fucking enormous.
well,
Yeah.
you can get a lot out of mass hysteria.
Yeah, and they're just putting
Indeed.
on a show. So I really felt like I spent all this I got all this training in the seminary and whatnot, and then here I am decorating a stage and
Mhm.
putting together visuals, and I mean that was just like not what I wanted to do as a seminary grad.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Right.
As an
So,
introduction, to the chapter, I would just say like this is a chapter that contains the Shema, which is like the kind of statement of God's unity traditionally.
Yeah, that's like
Um,
the most like important statement in Judaism.
Yeah,
think.
in Judaism, it's first of all, this section
Mhm.
and some other sections are inside the tefillin, the phylacteries that Jewish
the
men
mezuzah.
wear when they pray, and also the mezuzah, which is like
This and parts of in chapter 7.
yeah, that's where it is. Yeah,
A bit about
and
binding it on your arm and whatnot.
yeah, so binding on your arm, binding on your head. So these are the tefillin that they wear on their arm and their head, and the mezuzah is like is placed on the doorpost.
The doorpost.
Yeah. And it's just scrolls. So the tefillin is like scrolls inside leather boxes with leather straps, and the mezuzah is normally just a scroll in like a wooden or metal case, which is then nailed on a door. And it's also traditional that a Jewish person will say the Shema is like their last rites, or at least before you die, it's like the last thing you say is the Shema. I always thought as a kid, like, how do you know when you're going to die that you're going to say it, but never.
I guess it's only if you get the fade out death and not the
yeah, it's more like
actually
if someone's going to
anvil
execute you,
death.
then you do it. Like,
and here you get this
Yeah.
opportunity for famous last words, and no, they tell you what you have to say. I mean, like I think it was like Voltaire or I wish I could remember his name now. But there was this very colorful character in the 19th century who, when he died, said, "This wallpaper is killing me. One of us has to go."
yeah.
Oscar Wilde.
Yes,
Oscar Wilde. Thank
yes,
you.
that is Oscar Wilde.
Wow.
Wasn't Voltaire the one who the priest, insisted that he should renounce the devil as he was on his deathbed and said, "Sir, this is no time to be making enemies."
Making enemies. Yeah.
I think
I might. A Christian, I don't know what you'd call them, commenters, I wouldn't say they're apologists, people that comment on these sort of videos and stuff online, Twitter, whatever, they like to bring up the atheist's last words and how it proves that they renounce their atheism the last minute. And
Oh,
yeah,
the
it's
Anthony
the whole
Flew.
like there's
I
like
haven't seen
it's the
that.
whole there are no atheists in foxholes mentality, that kind
yeah,
of
it's very
thing.
similar.
Yeah,
they always manage to cook up
dumb.
a conversion story for any of us to get sufficiently famous for our deathbed.
Mhm.
Dawkins has actually threatened to film his own death so nobody can pull this shit when he dies, which is valid.
You know, I can't blame him for that, right?
No,
Like, yeah,
Didn't
One-
Hitchens do the same? I mean,
no, he wrote a
that's-
book on mortality that was put together. I mean, it was assembled by his friends after he died, but he wrote his thoughts.
Right.
Yeah.
right,
none
and then
of them
there's
worked out.
the headstones. Like W.C. Fields has a headstone that says, "On the whole, I'd rather be in Philadelphia."
I
All
still
right,
love
I think
the
we should get
mom-
on to reading.
Yeah.
Okay,
Who
I
wants
just want to say I just love the women who say you'll have this recipe over my dead body, and then they actually put it on their tombstone.
In that same vein of humor, I used to have a 1966 Cadillac Crown Victoria funeral coach. I had a hearse, a 66 Cadillac hearse. And the funniest thing about that was that my daughter was just a baby then. And I put a little sticker in the back window that said "Baby on board."
It's very dark.
Oh my god!
All right, so let's get reading. Mark, would you do the honors?
Sure.
Read
Where
it,
am I?
read it.
You go ahead.
Read the entire chapter. It's 25 verses.
Chapter 6, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Deuteronomy
And then
6.
what usually happens, I'll read the second. I'll have somebody else read the first chapter. I'll read the second chapter. We usually only get like 2 done in a typical day.
We're smart asses.
Sounds good. All right. And this is the instruction, the laws and the rules that the Lord your God has commanded me to impart to you, to be observed in the land that you're about to cross into and occupy, so that you, your children, and your children's children may revere the Lord your God and follow, as long as you live, all his laws and his commandments that I enjoy upon you, to the end that you may long endure. Obey, O Israel, willingly and faithfully, that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord your God of your fathers spoke to you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. I impress upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you're away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your head and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them upon your doorposts, on your house, and on your gates. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to assign to you, great and flourishing cities that you did not build, houses full of all good things that you did not fill, cisterns that you did not hoe, vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant, and you eat your fill. Take heed that you do not forget the Lord who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. Revere only the Lord your God and worship him alone, and swear only by his name. Don't follow other gods, any gods of the peoples about you. For the Lord your God in your midst is an impassioned God, lest the anger of the Lord your God blaze forth against you, and he wipe you off the face of the earth. Don't try the Lord your God as you did at Massah, but be sure to keep the commandments, decrees, and laws that the Lord your God has enjoined upon you. Do what is right and good in the sight of the Lord, that it may go well with you, and that you may be able to possess the good land that the Lord your God promised on oath to your fathers, and that all your enemies may be driven out before you, as the Lord has spoken. When in time to come your children ask you, what mean the decrees, laws, and rules that the Lord our God has enjoined upon you? You shall say to your children, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and the Lord freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand. The Lord wrought before our eyes marvelous and destructive signs and portents in Egypt against Pharaoh and all his household. And us, he freed us from there, that he might take us and give us a land that he had promised on oath to our fathers. And the Lord God commanded us to observe all these laws, to revere the Lord our God for our lasting good and for our survival, as is now the case. It will be therefore to our merit before the Lord our God to observe faithfully this whole instruction as he has commanded us.
Yeah, quite a few things, and I know that Tomer's going to have quite a lot of commentary on this, and so will Isaac, and I'm sure Mark will either, or as well. So yeah, the of course the big part about this, I do want to note. So we talked about the Shema before, and we were kind of hinted at maybe some potential henotheistic roots there. Now this has been debated back and forth for a very, very long time. It should be clear that this passage is wholly Deuteronomistic. There's even in let's see, so in the Shema, right, when they're talking about love and in your heart and your soul and all that stuff. So yeah, because in the ancient Near Eastern treaties, love just you meant loyalty, and that is a fairly common thing in those treaties. And if we compare something like the this and Deuteronomy 28 with Near Eastern treaties, it makes a lot of sense that this is kind of written in that same kind of style. It contains the exact same motifs. There's a whole lot of Deuteronomistic language in here, not just the Shema, right, but also where they're talking about, I believe it's in verses 14 through 15. No, sorry, not verses 14 through 15. In verse 18, do what is right and good in the sight of the Lord. That constantly pops out throughout the Deuteronomistic history. It's incredibly common. And the idea of the Shema, right? So in the newly published SBL Study Bible, they have this little aside where they're talking about, like, yes, this has obviously been used as a symbol of monotheism for a very long time. And Cat, holy shit, get the fuck out of here. They do note that in the context of Deuteronomy, it's likely better translated as the Lord is our God, the Lord alone, rather than a monotheistic statement expressing the belief that there is only one God in the universe. This translation would reflect a monolaridus or henotheistic belief, the idea that while many gods exist, Yahweh is the one whom the Israelites are to worship. And of course, this fits in with other statements like in chapter 4 and even in verses 12 through 13 here. And then only later it was taken as a statement of monotheism. Now, some scholars do, of course, disagree with that. Like Alter, for example, he's like, there is not really much evidence that the use of one there, I forget what the Hebrew term is for it.
Echad.
Echad. So he's like, yeah, there's really not great evidence that it was used in any way other than numerical, but I'm not sure about that. So we do have a lot of hints of henotheism here, and throughout all of Deuteronomy, even.
Well, I mean, it's an inclusive one, not an exclusive one. It's a unique word. I mean, of course, as a Christian, I'm going to say it leaves it open for the possibility of the Trinity.
Yeah, no,
obviously.
I get that. Like, I understand the Trinitarian view of it, right?
I would note that.
But I want to say, before we go there, I want to say something else though, because you touched upon. I think it's important for the audience to know too that for some reason Jesus decided to quote from Deuteronomy more than any other book, and you referenced this verse where it talks about love, and Jesus actually references this verse as well. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. I'm trying to find it here.
Yeah, that would make sense, right?
But quite clearly, its love is not your reference to love being related to how you treat these other nations, I would say, according to Christian, love means to give your life. And in the context of Deuteronomy here, the whole thing is about how you devote your life to God. So I would say that that's hogwash, Lawrence. Sorry.
That doesn't really contradict anything.
Maybe I misunderstood what you. Okay, so
So the
maybe we're in agreement.
usage of like how this is formatted, right? Because it has a lot of parallels to ancient Near Eastern vassal treaties, and like especially the Treaty of Asaradon, which, in my view, contains the most parallels with Deuteronomy, at least in terms of stuff that's biblical that can be compared with vassal treaties. So the Treaty of Asaradon is probably the best example of it in my view, but in a work like that, love is used to mean loyalty, and in this one as well, it's not really contradictory. So when you are said to love God, that's them saying that they're going to be loyal to God. That's not really a contradiction.
That's actually quite an interesting point from a deconstructionist perspective, because, of course, the devotion that is insisted in of us, of the love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. It's, in Christianity, it evolves into this incredibly toxic thing that undermines your entire sense of self at the expense of your devotion to theology and your willingness to do absolutely anything for others and put yourself last. And so to think of it as love in terms of loyalty. Oh, you and I both saw the joy. Jesus first, then others, then yourself. Bullshit. But to think of it, love in terms of loyalty, it's a lot clearer what the demands are there. I still have no intention of doing that, but it's good to know that they're talking about practical things, not contriving devotional emotions within yourself. And then,
love means to give your life. It means to sacrifice, like spending 10 hours a week professing the truth to atheists. That's a demonstration of love, for example. That's giving.
Why don't you ever do that then? I mean, why instead are believers always lying to me? All right, so we've got a couple of comments to read. Bruno Zygerts offers $5. Excuse me.
Did you guys see? I just said I love you. Did you guys see
Those are the
that?
calls.
Yeah. So Bruno Zygerts offers $5 Canadian and says, "Hey, Mark, I saw your interview with R.N. Ra. Welcome to the Legions of the Damned." Or welcome aboard.
And P-Town.
Yes, welcome to the Legions of the Damned, also known as the House of Fun. Temptations on its way.
I'm on the winning team.
Yeah. And then the Unlucky Legume offers $20. Thank you very much. And says, "Is it possible that the story in Revelation about people being forced to get a mark on their hand or their forehead is a reference to this passage about tying symbols on your hands and foreheads in Deuteronomy 6:8?
It's not just possible; it's 100%. It's a direct parody of it. If you look at the rabbinical literature of the time and where phylacteries were, or the tefillin, where they were meant to be worn. This cat is going fucking crazy.
Shut up, he loves you.
It's a direct parody, right? So in Jewish tradition, it was supposed to be at the top of the head and on your left arm, but in Revelation, it's on your right arm and your forehead. So it's a direct parody of it.
Well, in the right. Well, I mean, over here in the quotation that we have, it actually says between your eyes. It doesn't say on the top of the head.
Yeah. No, I know, but I'm saying that
the rabbinical tradition.
Does it say which hand? Did it say which hand here?
It doesn't say which hand here, but it's in rabbinical tradition.
It's important.
It was tied on the inside of the left arm.
Yeah.
Close
So the rabbinical tradition is between the eyes means centered between the eyes, but on the the hairline, and and tied on your arm, they say it should be on the arm closest to your heart, which is your left.
For
So
the
just remember
Christian,
the mark of the devil. They will wear his mark upon their forehead, and it's in the form of a red cap that says "Make America Great Again."
Yeah, I can.
you should know
I
that
can pull up the
I cannot believe
rabbinical
I never made
or the
that
Talmudic
connection.
something
quotations.
from outside of the Bible. But
I
I can pull up.
cannot
The
believe
thing
it.
is, the
you
thing
can
is,
pull
the context of Revelation matters, right? Because
Yeah.
at the time that it was written, they, in my view, it's a polemic against Rome. In the view
Oh,
of many
definitely.
scholars,
Yeah.
this cat is so fucking annoying.
well, I would say in the
You
context
have
of
an
this
orange
verse,
cat that
the
loves
main
you. This is what you
point
get.
the main point is not for when it comes to between your eyes and on your hand, it's not supposed to be taken purely literally. In this case, it's talking about the applications of keep it in front of your eyes and keep it in reach or something like that. Those two parts, I wouldn't from a Christian perspective, I don't think it means literal. It's the application of those things.
You should watch our Atheist Sunday School on that section of Revelation, because I go into it.
No,
in
I'm
detail.
talking about Deuteronomy here.
Oh, in Deuteronomy.
In
Okay.
Deuteronomy here.
So it's not literal
the Jews-
because Christians don't do it?
Yes, because
Yeah, well, I
Christian
mean, in
tradition
this case,
is
it's
the
different
moderator of Jewish reality.
How do you decide
trying to
if it's
explain,
literal or not?
trying to explain. So
Mm.
it's used throughout the Bible when say God said, he has you in his right hand, right? It doesn't actually mean physically in your right hand. What I'm saying is there's an application to these ones. A door post or on your fence post or upside, those could be probably more literal than in this case. There's an application to it being in your hand or being between, right in front of your eyes. Follow me?
I mean,
So
Is
I
it
think
like-
what
but
might
again,
have been intended.
you never
was-
know. You never know. It could be literal. It could be metaphorical. It could be both. So I agree with you. But in this case,
I mean,
from a Christian perspective, I would say
Mhm.
it's.
I mean, I think it's always been both. I think in a figurative sense, you're supposed to keep those laws and those concepts in mind. But some will take it to the extreme of, hey, you've got to literally have it right in front of you, but that implies that it's also in your mind.
But the
and that's where
Jewish
Christians would
tradition
draw the
and
line.
ritual is symbolic. I mean, religion
Yeah.
contains lots of symbolism and lots of rituals that are contained in order to remind and give a practical way to sort of bring the concept into your day-to-day life. It's probably easier to strap a block on your head and pray for every morning than to memorize so much of the Bible and constantly feel like if I'm talking about anything else, I'm a bad Christian. So
I don't know what type of Christian you ever were, but meditating on the word, it being our daily bread, like manna from heaven, this is a good thing. It's consistently edifying. It's a wonderful thing, Lilith. And it's not supposed to be
Edifying.
something that you're supposed to
your
condemn
name for
yourself
boring?
with.
Yeah, I
What
mean,
is
this is a
that?
direct. I mean, if you were to read this regularly, here is a commandment. God tells you, keep these words close. Impress your children with the law, with this, and recite it every day, and tie it on your hand and your forehead, and attach it to your doorposts. Like, these are just commandments to do. And then it's like, yes, it's not just from a Jewish perspective, it's not just you just do it. You also, what does it symbolize? And actually, the tefillin and mezuzah, the tefillin and the mezuzah are so important. Like, there is a very common trope in I guess Hasidic stories, or that something is happening wrong or whatever, and the person is infertile or whatever, and then they go to the rabbi for a blessing, and he says, check your mezuzah, check your tefillin, and then they go and they get it checked by a scribe, and they find that the word that means your children is rubbed out, and then the scribe fixes it, and then they get pregnant 9 months later.
That's why I'm bringing this up. Like,
there's
that's
just
taking
as
it too
many
far.
ridiculous viral
That's why
stories.
Jesus
it's just
came
mysticism.
that's why Jesus came to say, knock it off. That's what
No,
Jesus partly
you
came
do
to
the same thing in a
know,
different way. It's not.
Christians have just as
You
many
can't
viral
lose
stories
sight
that are
of the
perfectly
point of.
ridiculous.
You can't lose sight
Yeah.
of the essence of the story of what God is
You
telling you
know,
to do. He's
what I
telling you to
find
love Him,
incredibly funny is
not
that you
worry about
said
what's on your hand and if the ink rubbed off. That's just
E-Town,
it's irrelevant.
It's
you
symbolic. That's the
said
whole idea.
you said I condemn myself by disliking meditating on the Bible, and I find that
False. No, I was
incredibly.
worried because why would you consist?
And I find that
describe
and
it
I'll
as
answer
condemning yourself.
that.
Okay.
And I find that incredibly ironic, considering that several times in this, as we've been debating over who reads a chapter, I've said things like, well, dibs on the next genocide. And the next genocide came so soon that it was a perfectly consistent thing to say. So, you know, I'm disturbed by what you find edifying, but you know, I do also realize that you read your own narrative into this because that's what you've been taught to do.
I think that's what we could read between the lines is, you know, there's a way in which one can read through a lens, and depending on what lens you're wearing, you're going to see different things. And one of the things that I'm highly critical of Christianity is how they miss the connection of the law. And I like where you're going, Lawrence, about how this is directly tied to covenant. I think more particularly is that when the covenant is renewed and Moses sprinkles blood on people's faces, kind of goes back to that, in that this thing goes two ways. So God presents the laws, but he doesn't just give you all these commandments like, here, do this because I'm sovereign, but he makes promises along with that. And that's what it's often missed, is this direct connection between the law and the obeying of the law, the fulfilling of the law, with like this welfare of the land, and how it's meant to prosper you and how you will like reap from its benefits. But if you disobey, then the land becomes corrupt, and then eventually it kicks you out. And so it really does seem to me that the law is sort of webbed with this whole concept of the land and how this land is producing or not producing, where if you break the commandment, and the land sends you out, and that's how later I see scribes perhaps are justifying the exiles and stuff like that. But in Christianity, the concept of the land, the concept of prosperity is all completely lost, because they're now painting a different land, something that's in a different realm, like this heaven thing. But the law was never about going to heaven. The law was about being able to reap from the land and fulfilling what God meant for you from the very beginning. It's just how at least I read it.
It's so
Well,
blatantly
and it makes a lot
obvious
more
to
sense.
me that you have it's symbolic. You have Egypt, which is descriptive of the world. God frees you from the world, and now you're in the wilderness. You're an infant in Christ, and you walk and you learn to rely him on his provision. And then the promised land is, as you're edifying to become a mature Christian, you continue to rest on him and you cut off the sin in your life. This is it's so blatantly obvious, the parallels here as a Christian.
That's very anachronistic.
It's just the
G-Town.
truth.
Like, I understand how going through a Christian lens you could get there, especially
If
all
you
the stuff
study
about
it properly, yeah.
hating things of the world.
Yeah,
I mean,
properly just means
Origin.
reading what you already believe into it, whereas we're
That's
going
very anachronistic.
I've
the
mentioned how
laws, connections, history.
I've mentioned how Origin interpreted the 42 like places in the wilderness in this spiritual like progress. So it just, you could interpret a lot of this stuff in any way you want to. I mean, to me it
Yeah,
sounds
well,
very origin-y.
let's face it, you can, and that's why every religion breaks off into 35 billion segments who are all busy hating each other, because how dare you say that the Holy Spirit comes at the moment of baptism when clearly it comes at the moment of spiritual baptism. You're all heretics and going to hell. How dare you?
I like how
Yeah, what is this? The early church? Come on.
I like how I realize that English is not Tomer's first language, but he says it sounds very origin-y. I think the word is original.
No, origin.
No, it's the origin.
Speaking
Because
of origin,
Orange, stop
Alexandria.
gaslighting me.
It should be a
Yeah,
Roger.
but what I see out of this is just an awful lot of manipulation for mind control. This is simply brainwashing stuff. Put all of this stuff in the form. They just want to control how everyone thinks, or stop them from thinking and control how they believe.
Or alternatively, is it just kind of being put down what they already believe?
What just happened? I missed
Muted.
chapter 5, but it just transitioned to a personal nature of God. And you guys need to understand this idea of a personal God is unique to Christianity, and it should be because
And
it's special.
and
And
Hinduism.
you're playing with fire because he's also a jealous God. And we're going to come.
Except that
Yeah.
it's not unique to Christianity. Hinduism has
jealous
the
of
same
Judaism.
thing.
I've
No,
left
Jesus-
Phyllis
Well,
in
maybe
before, I'll
I'm
do it
wrong.
again.
Maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know.
As a final thing, before I think Tom is going to start his commentary, I'll
We
just
have
say that.
comments.
Yeah, we have. Oh yeah, I'll just say Judaism sees that there are literal readings and abstract readings, but they normally will keep both. They'll do the commandment of tying it to your hand and putting a scribing on your door, but they will also think about what it means in a more spiritual level as well.
Yeah, I think I can find something that the Book of Education says, like, why is it this thing?
Yeah, I've got some. Yeah.
But and what I think to add what Isaac said is that whatever figurative aspect of that, it's grounded upon the literal aspect of it. You can't take it beyond that, So that's where I see Christianity sort of like steering off the path, in that they take it way further. They just go off to a completely wrong direction.
Yeah, they read between the
There
lines
are
and then
certain-
eventually delete the lines. But like as Lawrence was pointing out, this language is based in actual contract law of the time, which is, it's called the law. This is not a huge freaking leap to say that the law is going to be based in relevant law of the area. Hello. And then, you want to read in all this emotional stuff that is built up over time. You want to do that privately, fine. But we're looking at some actual scholarship of, sources and what do these words mean in a practical sense. And it just doesn't bear out these later build up. Honestly, it's I swear to God, it's famine,
It's not
not
complicated,
famine.
guys.
I
Eyes see, hands touch. They have
I ju-
applications. It's not
I just-
overcomplicating,
I
making
think
anything
Tomer has not
simple.
finished his commentary.
No, I
That's
just
it.
wanted to mention
Sorry.
that I did find a justification in the Book of Education, at least. All of this is to remind us to avoid the crimes of our hands, and that we not stray after our eyes or after the impulse of the thoughts of our heart. That's at least for the tefillin of the hand.
Well, thank you.
maybe-
Thank you,
When
Aram, for
Jesus
doing what I was
says
thinking.
cut it off, he doesn't mean cut off your hand literally. When he says pluck out your eye, he doesn't mean pluck out your eye literally.
I agree.
Then
Can
why
we
does he
agree?
say
Thank
that?
What
No,
does it
the
mean?
thing is,
Lawrence agrees.
I agree with Pete on there on that, but the whole thing is that when you are I know why you're doing it, right? I know why you're reading the Christian perspective into this. That's not
Because
a
it's the
shock to me.
Bible.
Right? Yeah, it's not a shock to me.
It
I
was-
get that. But the
It was
thing
theirs
is,
first.
we have to remember that at this point in time, they had no conception of Jesus or Christianity. Their philosophy was different. Their theology was different.
It's so
And-
funny from coming from the guy where it was written 1,000 years after it quote unquote didn't happen. What? Come on, dude. What?
Okay,
What perspective?
I'm not
are you
sure how that
coming
was
from?
relevant. But do you
All
swim? Okay, so the thing is, you are taking it out of context is the thing. So you can apply it to at least
Jesus quotes from it.
right,
verbatim.
exactly. He
So
does
out of
quote from it,
context.
but that was 500, 600 years later. So
it would be 14 or 13 and
And-
a half. Again,
okay, great. So
hello.
even
It's not
I-
even,
I-
everything that comes in your mouth is not biblical. Is all I'm saying. It's and you don't
course,
believe in it
I'm
anyway.
Of course,
So you don't
I'm
have the
comparing
time right.
ancient world.
You're not going to quote from it.
I'm sorry
And,
that I'm
like-
interjecting, But the comments are piling up. We have like
Yep.
6 more comments, and I think we should dedicate.
Yeah, let
some
me
time to
run
them.
through those real quick. First of all, Tomir's favorite math fairy says, P-Town, if you never knew which parts of the Bible should be taken literally, your own words, how did you decide that Genesis should?
Okay, so that's a tough part for me, right? Because a lot, quite frankly, I believe the Bible for other reasons. I believe it's objectively divine. For me to believe literally in a global flood and that God made man fully formed as well as trees and everything, yeah, it takes a lot of faith. I won't deny that.
You did
I have
just
to
say
note that most
you said your
Christians don't take it
subjective
literal.
belief was objective.
I just explained. Sometimes it can be, if it's referring to a hand, it's referring to the application of the hand. If it's referring to the eyes, it could be referring to the There are ways to defer it. You use the Bible to interpret the Bible. When it comes to Genesis, I'll just flat out say it. What I believe in when it comes to Genesis, a global flood, and God making us in his image is just flat out way better than what you guys believe in too. I also just want to. It's awesome. What I believe in is awesome. You guys listen to like Hitchens. You believe that all death and destruction and catastrophe over billions of years were made by chance. It's disgusting. Compared to what I believe. So there is that aspect too. What do you guys think?
Thank you for
What you
admitting
believe
that
is
you make
divine-
believe because you want to, and that's the reason why you believe.
That's an
That is
aspect
true.
because it's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, but also
it's not awesome and
divine-
it's not objective,
divine
and that you haven't
command
said
theory-
anything else about it that was true, but you do want to make believe that, and so that's why you pretend that that's true. We don't believe the same way that you do. We understand the realities, and we don't have to make believe like you do. And by the way, it's not because our position is way more awesome, but it does happen to be way more awesome than what you believe.
That
We
is
should have
true.
that
It is
discussion
nice.
sometime.
Also, can I just say-
We'll talk about
We get back to the text.
our worldviews, and we'll see how that holds up. Add that to the
But
list.
we should do that.
I think
But
we
I
should.
don't
There's
I
another
don't know that I
comment.
can take you seriously anymore. Just got to be flat out honest. After the
I-
last time, I cannot take you seriously anymore.
I
I'm
believe
open to have
literal-
that discussion with somebody else who maybe can feign sincerity a little bit better than you can. All right. So the next comment is Satan for Satan 616 said, offers 25 RON. What is
Romanian lei.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And in a life or death situation, if you had to choose between God and your children, what would you choose? Don't avoid the answer.
He doesn't. It's one that I should avoid since I'm literally in front of a bunch of atheists who are going to spin and lie about what I say. But of course, I'll choose.
Except that we
God.
don't ever lie. And if you're going to make an accusation like that, you had better be
You
able to
just
back it up.
misquoted me just a second ago. The reason
I
why I
didn't.
believe in a literal Genesis is because I believe the Bible, and because the Bible has been objectively has become objectively true in my mind. I am convinced of it.
But in
That's
your
why.
mind,
That's
which
why.
defies the term
Because I have
objectively,
evidence for it.
it's a subjective belief if it's
Because I
in
have
your
evidence
mind.
for
It
it.
has been objectively proven to be bullshit.
False.
This is a discussion for a different.
But the point
Yeah.
is yes, I love that chapter, Genesis 22, with the binding of Isaac. I think it is a very powerful and
So you would choose God.
And it was the yes, but God is a just God. He's
Over
not gonna
your
hurt my
children.
If
Just
God
like
was a
if he
just
said-
God, by definition, God would not ask you that. God only asks you that because he is not just. Because that is not a just request. And not even the part where it says, hey, never mind, just kidding. That's not just either. And it's inconsistent. This is supposed to be omniscient God, and he wants to test you with something so ridiculous as that. How the fuck do you not understand what objectivity means? How the fuck can you take that and find beauty in such horror? I don't get it. That is absolutely repugnant.
Well,
Let me
so
make
anyway,
it clear, I have no children.
Genesis 22 is a great example of how prophecy can be basically, essentially proven that Jesus is the Messiah.
God's sake.
What?
This is
Yeah,
nonsense.
like I said, I can't take you seriously anymore.
Okay,
Moving
I
on to the next
have no
comment.
It doesn't
children.
make sense without Jesus. You're right. It doesn't make sense, but it makes sense with
quiet.
Jesus. And by
It
the
does
way,
not make
my
sense
second
with Jesus
child is
either.
due tomorrow, by the way.
For the record, I have no children. And I would choose every and any child on this earth over God without the slightest hesitation.
Yep. So now Matt White offers comment, says, Aaron, by Bible study, we learn the thoughts of Mike Johnson. The study is thereby essential. Yeah, except that Mike Johnson, when he says that the Bible gives his opinion on all these things, he means the exact opposite, because he does not. Well, I mean, he's anti-abortion for one thing, so you know he's against Numbers Numbers chapter 5, and a whole lot else. There's a whole lot of things that Mike Johnson, where the Bible says one thing and Mike Johnson says something very different.
Yeah.
All right, so then Minute Rice offers $10 and says, want to donate for Aaron's kick-ass Godzilla shirt. I need to get one like that to add to my collection of Godzilla t-shirts. Hope this helps pay for your ticket to see -1. Yeah, I am excited about seeing -1. And then Bryce Barnett says, Mark, you're awesome for allowing your beliefs to be falsifiable and allowing them to be falsified. Almost all believers I know would tell me no amount of evidence would change their mind.
Yeah, I wonder if we have an example of someone like that on
Yeah.
What is evidence anyway? It's just subjective. Maybe the sun is an orange.
Oh,
My
wow.
side outweighs your side by far. That's why.
So
It is-
you
it's
say, and
such a
yet you have
restricted
nothing
view.
but your assertions.
Like you're looking at this one
I do want to
book,
comment on
It's how you
P-Town.
analyze things.
you're looking at this one book only in context of the Old Testament and the New Testament, but the thing is, like, this was a product of the time, so like trying to take it out of that historical context is doing it a disservice.
That's not
like
what it is.
like looking at the Old Testament alone and the New Testament alone and trying to interpret them based off of each other is so anachronistic it hurts. Like the amount of stuff and context that you're missing from the ancient world is fucking wild. Like it makes way more sense, I think, if you look at it in a secular view through the lens that this is indicative of changing cultures, and that to me is so much more amazing than like any kind of creation narrative could be. Like the fact that like little remnants of culture and evolution of culture can be preserved in a text spanning such a long time is fascinating. And then furthermore, the idea of moral command of like divine command theory for morality is so fucking disgusting, but I don't have enough time to rail on that. So
It is possibly the most immoral moral system ever conceived. But I want to know what Mark was going to say about
Mark, can I respond real quick and then before you?
He hasn't.
Well, I wanted to ask you, what about Genesis 22? Did you find that's like proof that Jesus?
I would love to have that conversation. That would take a little
is
bit
it
of time.
just the fact that the sacrifice of a son exists in both concepts?
But there's so many patterns where this relationship between Abraham and Isaac is like the father and the son. It's pointing towards what is to come. There's going to be a new father and a new son. Okay, but there's hundreds of little patterns there. That's the first time the word love appears. The word love is ahab. Okay, it's the father with like the breath of life, just like Abraham changed to Abraham. You insert that into father, you get the word for love. The first time the word love appears, it means pay attention. And here he's telling his son, it doesn't make sense. The Jews can't make sense of it. It only makes sense with Jesus. It's prophecy. Lawrence,
No, Christianity is a corruption of that, actually.
That's the dumbest thing I ever fucking heard.
Now,
it's quite the opposite.
The stupidest shit.
All time.
And I keep trying to understand. I keep trying to hold my tongue, but holy shit, that's stupid. These are not prophetic works, P-Town. They never were meant to be that way until Christianity came along and started co-opting these things into prophecies. They are not prophetic texts. Get your head out of your ass.
People with advanced degrees in the topic.
To stand
You're
the
telling
test
them they're
of
going to
time.
be held accountable for ignorance. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever fucking heard.
Have you ever heard of a creationist respecting academic scholars on any fucking thing?
I will have a discussion
You are
about
devoted
the Bible
to ignorance.
with anyone with
You're in love with your
many years
ignorance.
they've been in seminary or attending any college. I don't care as long as it's
Of
about
course,
the Bible.
because Christianity lacks all humility. It's a supremely arrogant position.
It's
Yeah,
I would
and we
say
could
it
do
is
this for a
offensive.
long damn time.
Yellow
But
next.
Kicker White Lion offers 100 Czech kroner. It says, question for P-Town.
Again.
Because we just got to keep
Guys,
poking
I
that.
love you. Stop.
He paid
Yeah.
for it.
It says, what is disgusting about a 4 billion year long legacy of survival through struggle and success despite odds, an unimaginable line of survivors that leads to you, the next step?
Oh, he's asking about your guys' imaginary religion. Yeah, so
No, it's
billions-
imaginary if
No,
you call it a
that's what
religion,
it's
because it's not a
dying.
religion.
through
That-
suffering.
Just let him
that-
answer.
You
I
know
that's
that
what
it's not a religion, and you just called it a religion because you are a liar, and so you have to pretend that everybody else is a liar.
Just let him answer. Just let him answer.
It's
Stop
how I would
lying.
define religion.
We
What's
know
your
he's a
religion?
liar. We know he's wrong. All right.
I knew it would trigger you, so I'm
just
sorry.
just let him. Just let him.
So
But
that's what
answer
you
the
do.
question.
It's just baiting.
because
say,
you're
well, I told
innocent if not triggering. Come on now.
it. No,
look,
no.
What the
do I
hell are
have
you
to
I
go
will
into
talking
detail?
trigger
about?
you all I
It's
want
more,
to, but I don't
more
have
than
to
just
lie to do it.
it's more than just disgusting, Kicker White. It's also the exact opposite of what the God of the Bible declares in so many different ways. You want to believe that death is what brought us into this world through random chance and just things struggling, and
Death is a part
none
of
of it
life.
makes sense,
Grow
by the way,
up.
when you break it down. But
Yeah, that's because you got it wrong
going
again.
to the
as
Bible,
always.
it was sin that brought death into the world.
Yeah, well, the
Except that
Bible's
we
full of
already
shit.
know that can't be true because death already existed in the world before the sin happened.
You're counting. You don't. No, that's silly.
Yeah,
They
I'm just
ate
reading
the
the script.
fruit.
What the
because
scripture
That
actually
means
says.
they
that's
took
That there was a
living cells
there was a
into
tree
their
of
body
eternal
and
life.
killed them to
fruit
eat.
So
withers.
you have to ignore
It
your
doesn't
own
die, according to
scripture
the
to
Bible.
pretend that it says what it doesn't say because you're lying. But the
Plants
truth
don't
is
die in
that there is a tree of eternal life in there, so that upends and destroys your entire perception of this.
Yeah. Genesis, just like the Epic of Gilgamesh, just like the Enuma Elish and others, presuppose immortality to be a thing already. In fact, the reason why they're writing a story like Adam and Eve is to explain why is there such thing as mortality? Like, why do humans die?
Because
So,
we
yeah.
object to
Kicker White,
dying
you
and
should
we've
go.
never liked it, which fair enough. But
Mhm.
at some point you have to grow up and accept that that's part of life. And
Most
if
people,
you don't, you will be dragged into every manner of cruelty and absurdity to try and keep yourself from the inevitable. It's the way of the coward. The
Also,
coward dies many times before his death, the valiant taste of death but once.
also,
It is
P-Town,
dishonest, and I have no respect for it.
P-Town, do you realize that when you keep calling reality a religion, you do that because that makes it less likely to be true? Just apply that
I'm
same
just
thing
gonna
to
ignore your loaded
Christianity,
questions.
and
We've
you
talked about
might
this.
you might be discovering
I'm going to
something.
ignore your loaded questions.
It's not a loaded question.
ignore your
It's
loaded
the
questions.
only
We talked about
reason
this.
why. It's the only reason why people like you call reality a religion,
off.
because they know theirs
off.
is not true.
I
So
only said it
Satan
because I knew.
616 says, P-Town, think about the answer you've given and look into your children's eyes. Hope you are proud. Satan 616, I have to tell you that the way the faith mind works is they will look for something that will challenge their faith and then overcome it. So if you need to believe so badly that you would put the value even over your children, then when you realize you value your children, you would kill your children in defense of your faith. If that's what it would take to make you believe harder.
Yeah.
If P-Town won't choose his children over God, I will.
I wanted to say, Kicker White, you should look at Christopher Hitchens does a good rendition. Keep in mind, most Christians believe in the nonsense of evolution in millions and billions of years. But look at Christopher Hitchens. He uses that as an argument against God. He does a good description of where I'm coming from, and it's famous. And Satan, I don't really care what you think, Satan. I love my children. I give my life to my kids. Well, I only have one. One's coming in theory tomorrow, we're guessing, so I'm on call. But no, it's a sacrifice, and that's what love means. It means to give your life for people. I love my kids, and if God promised, that my descendants would be as vast and as innumerable as the stars of heaven. And then he called me to put them on the altar. I like to believe that I have enough faith to do that, because plus God's not gonna, he keeps his promises, and he's either gonna resurrect that kid or he's gonna stop it and intervene, just like he did in the Akedah, chapter 22 of Genesis.
Just like he let
And he
Jesus
didn't
come
I want
back.
to say thank
Or
you.
The only two words I have: morally bankrupt.
I want
Also,
to
we have
thank
to-
P-Town. I want to just say thank you, P-Town, for giving us this very clear, very articulate example of the incredible and absolute evil that faith is at its core and that it leads to.
Yeah,
You
not
have
just psychotic.
demonstrated not just the dishonesty, but the evil of your religion better than any of us could have articulated. Thank you.
Yep. I got to side with that. Okay,
I
so
think this is
Tomer.
I think this is the longest we've gone without starting any commentary.
No, actually, Exodus 20.
Oh yeah, he
I
remembers.
can't believe you keep records of that.
I'm sure Tomer keeps records.
Yeah, that's 10 Commandments.
He
I remember
remembers.
you discussed discussed about it for like 1 hour before I had any commentary to say. So
It's
yeah,
almost 3 minutes away from the hour.
Tomer.
But I'm really interested to hear this, so let's go for it.
well, I see another comment coming up. There we go.
Okay, so Bruno Zygerts offers $10 Canadian and says Christians want to believe that if creation is like a jet with someone in the cockpit, rather than the notion that there is nobody in the cockpit and there's no cockpit. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I've heard creationists make that kind of argument, that somebody needs to be driving the earth because it's terrifying that there's nobody driving.
Yeah,
I
well,
guess I'm not
our
really following
planet
that.
is flying through space and nobody's driving.
Yep.
Okay, so an hour in, I'll start my
Yeah, sure.
commentary. Verses 2 to 3. Nelson comments. Verses 2 to 3 move from Yahweh's past act of commanding in verse 1 to the present discourse of Moses and on the extended time and wonderful locale of Israel's obedience. Reference to the land and to the future generations forges a rhetorical connection to those reading the book. Because these verses shift to second-person singular address, they may be a later supplement to verse 1, added in the spirit of chapter 4. Fear, in verse 2, describes a reverence for Yahweh that results in keeping the law. The expanded phrase could mean either fear in order to keep or fear by keeping. Verse 3 uses a traditional description of the land to inspire attention and obedience. Milk and honey are choice foods, as seen in Genesis 18:8 and 43:1, but also represent the sweetness of human love, according to Song of Songs 4:11 and 5:1. Now, about verse 4. So the Hebrew is Shema Yisrael Yehovah Elohenu Yehovah Echad, which literally reads, Hear Israel, Yahweh our God, Yahweh one. And in the Masoretic text, Peter, can please show the picture? Thank you, Peter. So in the Masoretic text, the letter Ein in Shema, which is the first word, and Dalet in Echad, which is the last word, are enlarged. The most famous reason for this is that the letters create the word Ed, which means witness or testimony. Another reason that the Dalet is enlarged is to not confuse it with the letter Resh, which looks similar and could be read Acher, another, meaning another Yahweh. So that's one way to.
There's also a tradition. Religious Jews, when they say the Shema, they will try to elongate the word Echad. But interestingly enough, since the sound has diverged from biblical times, and they don't pronounce that letter as it probably was originally, you can't really elongate Echad. So they normally will elongate the second letter. And actually, when I was like a teenager and I discovered that there were other accents and other ways of reading Hebrew, I was like, oh, so this is proper. So I was like trying to be proper, and I used to say a with a the sound rather than a sound.
That is easier to elongate, linguistically
exactly.
speaking. You can
see that there is a history. It's proof that there is. It proves that it used to be pronounced as a. I don't know. Is it? I don't know what the word is for it, but like a non-plosive, whatever.
Yeah,
maybe.
a non. I was thinking not plosive. That. Oh,
I think that might be the expression. Yeah. So yeah, normally it's if you see the letter Dalet, if it had a dot in it, then it would be pronounced duh, and without a dot, it would be pronounced the. But nowadays they're both pronounced duh.
Yeah,
Is it
you can remove
possible
the-
that emphasizing that final Dalet on Echad that perhaps implies that there was a history of maybe some scribal errors that turn into the alternative, like you mentioned, Echar, Ohar?
Yeah, so like
means
to
something
stress
a
that
little
it's
different?
not acher. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it doesn't make sense. I mean, a different Yahweh. It doesn't
Right.
really.
It's not necessarily a scribal
It kinda
error,
does.
but like
It kind of
that's
does.
more of
'Cause-
like
'cause-
an L thing, because the word L meaning can mean one god or gods or whatever.
But also, let's be
Well-
clear here, right? Because we're local Yahweh cults, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
Yahweh
yeah.
Eerdmans is
And
one
I
of
want to
them,
get
right?
to
So-
it
Yeah.
actually.
So there's like the Phoenician one, right? There's a Phoenician version. Like there's different. It seems like.
What was that one like early? Oh frick! It was. I haven't watched this documentary in so long, but it was an early town that was named after Yahweh, and they think it might have been named Yahoo. And so I was like, oh my gosh, you mean God's name might have once been Yahoo?
It actually was. That's not even like.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
a lot of
has a
I'm
thing in his
aware
book
that's a
about it.
factual piece of information.
Semitic,
It's
right?
also very funny.
yeah, there's a lot
I'm
of
not making a
names.
pun.
There are a lot of personal names in Hebrew that have the Yahoo ending.
Yeah.
So it which is based on sometimes it just has Yah as well, and it comes from the same name.
Which, by the way, names like that are actually evidence that it's Yahweh and not Jehovah. So everyone
Oh,
watch
yeah.
keep
It's
that in
never
mind.
Jehovah. That was a
Well,
Germanic.
I'm
Well,
going
obviously it
with
was never Jah, but yeah.
I'm going with the Masoretic text reading. That's Jehovah.
Yeah, Yehovah, yeah.
According to the MT. But
And
Well, you guys know the
was a
history about
famous
that,
quote.
right?
There was
About
a
the
quote
history of
from- Go ahead. I'm sorry.
those vowels in the name are simply a way to remind the scribe not to pronounce Yahweh but to say Adonai instead,
yeah.
or the alternative Hashem,
Yeah.
which is contemporary.
yeah,
The
so
idea-
Not that those vowels were part of the name.
yeah, in the Masoretic, the tetragrammaton, those four letters are written either with the vowels that say Yehovah, which is the same class of vowels as Adonai, because the A is like a short A, so it's written with a regular kamatz, with a shwa next to it. So a shwa and a chataf kamatz they're the same vowel kind of. So those two are the same, and then or like Yeho is the same as Ador, and then Nai Yehovah. So these are the same vowels, and sometimes it's actually written with different vowels. So it's kind of like Ho V, and then that would be read as Elohim.
I think it's
And it's very
amazing,
rare.
actually, that the idea of God's name being Jehovah, which is one of the basis fundamentals of the entire Jehovah's Witness cult, which is clearly it's not. But if we go back through the linguistics and we look at the context of how these vowels were put in to remind people to say something different because the name was too sacred and all of these things in context, it shows how reading something without any of that context will lead you to just make up something that had nothing to do with anything intended by the original author. And I sometimes I think that's the whole fucking story of Christian theology, but that's another discussion. We'll get there.
Yeah, there's this wonderful
Even though in the
comment.
Bible itself it says, "Don't add to it." Don't.
Which
take
the
anything out
Christians
of it."
did.
Ridiculous.
They did.
Yeah.
They
There's a
Hardcore.
New Testament.
Hardcore.
You don't
The
change.
in the Christian
You
Bible,
don't
it
change
is.
what it says.
No, but
wanna
you
say,
you
"Oh,
are
take
because
this
you're
outside
refusing
stuff
to
that's
learn
not in the
about
Bible
the
and change
context.
it."
Keep
It
down
has-
But you know, the
Right.
worst one
Learn
is
about
how
the
they
context.
reordered the Old Testament by ending it with Malachi. When
Just
if you read the end of
Yeah.
Second Chronicles, it says that.
Yeah, but
It's
see,
a
I'm
contract.
sorry. I'm sorry, Jackson. I haven't finished the comment.
Yay! Tomer said
Did
the
you
thing.
finish?
Tomer
Did you
said the
finish for
thing.
the verse though? Did you finish verse
I
4?
didn't finish for the verse.
Okay, finish verse 4. I have one last.
Yeah, so Tigay offers 3 possible interpretations of this verse. The first is Yahweh is our God, Yahweh alone, according to Ibn Ezra and Rashbam. The problem is that the word alone is usually expressed by levad and rarely by echad, as seen in 1 Chronicles 29:1 and possibly Joshua 22:20 and Job 23:13. Furthermore, there's a syntactic difficulty here. It interprets the words Yahweh our God as a subject and a predicate, meaning Yahweh is our God, which is rare in the Bible and anomalous in Deuteronomy, where Yehovah Elohim is a fixed phrase meaning Yahweh our God. And the second option is the Lord our God, the Lord is one, appearing in the Septuagint, Vulgate, Targums, Nash Papyrus, and KJV. This interpretation can be explained in 2 ways. Yahweh is special and there's nobody like him, or that Yahweh is indivisible, i.e., he's not made of multiple gods. The problem with this interpretation is that it leaves the second Yahweh superfluous, and Yahweh our God is one would have sufficed. The third option, and possibly the more interesting one, is Yahweh our God is one Yahweh, and not many Yahwehs. This is based on the pagan act referring to gods by their name and place of worship. In fact, in Kuntilet Achrud, we find a reference to Yahweh of Samaria and Yahweh of Yemen. Tigay notes that some scholars believe that this manner of speech could imply that there were several deities of each name, and that such a danger was developing in Israel. Therefore, Deuteronomy wishes to fight against splitting Yahweh into many deities. He notes that this phenomenon is common in Christianity, where with the worshiping of Mary. Some of Mary's attributes are based on names of places, such as Our Lady of Guadalupe or Our Lady of Lourdes. While the Catholic Church official belief is that all these ladies, quote unquote, are the same Mary, some people saw them as different Marys, quote unquote. And there were even quarrels between followers of different ladies, quote unquote, and the church acted against this belief. He writes, however, that there is no evidence that the danger of local Yahwehs was developing in Israel, and such a danger seems foreign to the context of Deuteronomy 6, which is concerned with Israel's relationship to God, not his nature. Tigay concludes that the first option is the most likely, although it is uncertain. Weinfeld, Nelson, and Lundbom also support this option.
Yeah,
So
I
I
think
just wanted to
that-
bring.
sorry, just on that. So the way I always viewed it was that, like, at least if I were, in ancient Israel, I would view them as, all these local deities. I view them as the same God, but different manifestations of it. Maybe a few different wants here and there, depending on the community, right? So, like, to me, it wouldn't have been, that big of an issue. But it is interesting that, some people would have thought that, like, at least for the Mary thing, that they think that they're different ladies, right?
It's well, at
Although
least
that's
there
where
were
you
a
get into the
handful
whole
of Marys in
Nestorian
the story.
controversy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just an example of
Uh,
that practice.
I find it interesting the way that you talk about Lawrence. I've noticed this. You notice this even today in the difference between educated religious thought and uneducated religious thought, which we've been able to demonstrate so excellently today. The Greeks, when they started expanding and everything, and they wanted to make a somewhat better, healthier relationship, there were these theological ideas that came up. What if Hermes and Thoth are really the same God? It's just that they have different stories to relate their relationship with the God, and we have the stories that relate our relationship with an understanding of the God. But what if it's manifesting the same aspect?
Mhm.
Just, different people in histories have different ways of understanding it. And so you have this more sort of overarching view, this higher up look where you can see some intricacies and depth and validity to different perspectives because you take them in a context of people and history and culture and all the rest of it that exists. Whereas the small-minded and really fundamentalist of every religion will damn to hell their nearest related groups. I mean, how many times have you heard Protestants say that Catholics aren't real Christians, and the Pentecostals aren't real Christians because they believe in speaking in tongues, and that's demonic, so they're all going to hell. And they don't believe in speaking tongues, so they're all going to hell. And so the small-minded groups, and it was the same way back in other religions in ancient times. It's not perfectly correlated with education. There were some comparatively uneducated but still open-hearted people, and there were some well-educated uptight assholes. But generally speaking, there was the more inclusive view of maybe this is nuanced and intricate and interesting, and people are different and respond to this in different ways. And there was the, no, my God's better than your God, stab him now version. And thought flows between these extremes.
Yeah, and I think that it also flows between like fundamentalism and then whatever the ruling empire of the time is trying to put their own spin on it. Because generally, the tendency as civilizations conquer lands that have people that have certain, distinct religious beliefs is to syncretize everything. And so, like, say, well, yeah, your Yahweh, it's kind of like our Zeus. Your Yahweh, it's kind of like our Set. And so I think part of what might be happening here in Deuteronomy in this post-exilic time that, where this could have originated from is we're going to correct our understanding of who Yahweh really is. And the way that it does it is by way of explaining clearly what he thinks, or, the law and its application and the consequences of disobeying such law.
And I understood that Deuteronomy was pre-exilic. The Deuteronomist source was largely pre-exilic, although obviously it was edited post-exilic because everything was. But it was certainly into, times of strife, and they had been under the yoke of at least the Assyrians by then. So there does seem to be a lot of justification for, if you do wrong, this horrible thing will happen that we just see has already happened. So obviously you did wrong, there's sort of retconning justification in there, which again, always reminds me of an abusive relationship, but that's a different tangent.
Yeah, huge throughout the Deuteronomistic history and the prophets especially.
Yeah. If you do the thing, bad things will happen. This thing that just happened to those people, it's totally why. That's one of the weirder phenomena I'd like to know if there are any studies on in religious thought of how horrible things happening to the faithful seems to increase their faith.
Yep.
And
I'm sure there are studies on that.
And the justifications they come up with, if you read John Calvin when he's justifying his position to whoever's arguing with him, they're like, see, there was this catastrophe in your city. Obviously, God is opposed to you. And he's like, no, God loves us more. So he disciplines us first. It's because we had horse racing and betting in our city that we had this earthquake. And at the surface, you're like, no, logically, if you thought God was punishing you, it would be because you were wrong about something theologically before it would be because someone bet on the horses. But no, he insists on this interpretation, and it's like, it's always conclusion first, justification second.
One last thing about verse 4, about the Shema proclamation. So there is a later Jewish idea. I mean, Rashi brings it down and he quotes from Zechariah. So in Zechariah 3:9, it says, "For then I will turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the names of the Lord." So it's kind of prophetic, saying that all the nations will call upon the name of the Lord. And then in 49, it says, "In that day shall the Lord be one, and his name one." So this idea is that what we are reading here is kind of saying God is our God, or Jehovah is our God, and in the future he will be the only. Like all nations will worship him in the future. That's like another idea, but obviously this was written
either by conquest, because you worship this god or I'll stab you, or it could come about by absorbing all concept into the meta concept of a generic divine.
I mean, Rashi is writing this in the context of living in a Christian country with the Islamic conquest of Spain not that long ago.
Fun.
And the
So
Crusaders happening as well.
yeah, that's true.
There was also I
Right,
forget
but that
how
wouldn't
do you
have
say it?
necessarily changed
The
the hegemony of
1096
monotheism.
disaster. I can't remember, like pogroms.
Yeah, but I'm
Was it
saying from his
1096?
perspective, in south of what's it called, Provence?
Provence?
Yeah, provincial France. In the 9th century or whatever, like it would have seemed to him like the whole world had, come to monotheism.
They were all worshiping the God of Abraham, different heads of the Hydra, but
Right.
I can keep my commentary, or I'm seeing some comments if anyone wants to read them.
All right, so Trevor Wright says, in the Vedic text and other religions, certain texts aren't taken literally as well as historical. So why, P-Town, do you think the Bible is any different?
This was
It's my honest interpretation of the
Another drink.
scripture. I'm gonna honor it without any reservations. It should be important, though, for me to say, like in these 2 chapters that hopefully we'll have time to cover, for a Christian, the meanings behind these events are far more important. That's the discussion amongst Christians, and it has nothing. It doesn't have a lot to do with the literal and the historical. It has to do with what it was setting up for what was to come, and how God plays a role in our life, how we are saved and redeemed through Jesus and the Holy Spirit. Hi, sweetie. So
right. So
anyway.
Okay, yeah. So the man-made interpretation is more important than the word of the God. Okay.
It's not man-made. It's just the way the scripture's designed.
Whatever. We're
Clearly
not,
not, but
gonna spend time
he
on this
also
one.
said that this was his honest interpretation, which we know is not honest. He calls reality fantasy, remember? So, Matt White says, Tomer, how accurate is the Shema portrayed in Neil Gaiman's Sandman, Sound of Her Wings?
I don't know what that is.
So
I've
I think
looked
he's
it up
talking about
on
the
Google.
TV series.
There is a comic I've seen, and from I think it reads Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, which I think is Ashkenazi. Sounds
Yeah, I mean,
Ashkenazi.
yeah, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Yeah, so
like sort of Ashkenazi pronunciation. So I mean, the Hainu is could be more Hasidic pronunciation. They would say
could
like
be.
Shema, let's say Shema Yisrael Adonai.
Or
No, I don't
maybe
know,
I
I'm
said
not good at
it,
it.
or maybe I exaggerated it. It's Eloheinu.
Yeah.
It's Eloheinu.
No,
I
I
don't
think
know.
yeah.
I think Eloheinu. Okay.
Okay.
And then SJL says, I'd be far more impressed with a God that planned out the entire universe from the start rather than one that poofs everything into existence one at a time. Still don't believe in it. And then Rachel Light says, it just seems amazing on how all of the Asian countries seem to be left out. Did God have something against Asians? Just curious.
Not in all of them. India is
Well,
mentioned.
only Asians, because if it's in Asia.
I mean, India is
Right.
mentioned in Esther. I
Yeah, I'm
believe.
saying like West, like Middle East is in Western. Well, not Middle East, but the Levant is in West Asia. So
Yeah.
There's a
Although
huge
it would
mission field in
Go ahead,
China.
Peter.
There's a huge mission field in China, except for you get killed. But I think that's the next frontier. And
Well,
there's a lot. And if you go, you look at the paleo, or if you look at the
P-Town is telling
Chinese
us to
written
look
language,
at the paleo.
it's pretty cool how well the paleo Chinese lexicon.
oh no,
The guy who just said that millions of years is nonsense is telling us to look at the paleo.
I think it's
Oh,
right
he's-
Paleo Chinese.
He's talking about the
Paleo-
crap
or
about
even
the.
the modern Chinese, you can derive.
It's complete
pretty
rubbish.
cool.
This has all been debunked, by the way. The idea that Chinese hieroglyphics mention like the flood or anything like that is complete rubbish.
No, sorry, it is what it is. You can.
Oh,
No,
you
that
can choose
isn't
to
what
call
it is.
It's
though.
not
but
what
it
you
is what
say
it
it is. It is what it
It's
is,
not
but
what
it's
it is.
not what you
Some
say.
guy
it is.
wrote a book and it's full of
Vessel.
fallacies. That's the problem. That's the issue.
Thank you for continuing to tell such obviously and easily proven lies. You're only making Christianity more absurd than it needs to be. And honestly, as a former Christian, I'm a bit offended.
Just to
Yeah,
be
and
clear,
also-
when
Pictogram
talking,
is
talking
vessel, 8 mouths. It is what it is. It is what it is. If you guys want to call it crazy, then that's fine.
But you also
That's
have
your
to. You
prerogative.
also need to know that
It is
the,
We
what
the
don't have to
history
call
of
it crazy.
That's cool.
We
That's
can just
cool.
hear
Chinese
you say
characters.
it, and people will
Chinese
understand that
characters
it
have
is.
Flood is
through their
eight
history.
united earth, total water. That's the word for flood in the pictogram. Huh.
It isn't though.
You can say it's just
No.
coincidence.
And
It
I
isn't,
did a
though.
video on this.
Oh, yeah.
It is absolute nonsense.
To create.
And
to
Potholder
breathe out a
54
mouth
did as well.
alive.
Yeah,
Well,
that's what it was.
obviously, P-Town saw something he wants to see, so who cares what Egyptologists and scholars say who actually understand
Or
hieroglyphs?
Chinese
You guys are just
readers.
gonna go la
Right,
la
I
la
get-
la
I get it.
la. It's not real. Just
That's
like
literally you, P-Town.
everything.
You're describing
You have to prove it. You can't just
Thank you.
say
Yeah,
some guy
millions of
wrote a
years
book.
is not
Well.
real. Evolution's not real. Reality's not real. But this idiotic thing that came from Dr. Karl Baugh and his Lie Factory. Oh, that's absolutely correct.
Wait, that came from Dr. Karl Baugh?
Bob,
vessel.
the
eight
fraud that all the
mouths
even the
equals boat.
biggest liars in creationism are like, oh, dude, he is too full of shit. We cannot associate ourselves
Karl
with him.
Baugh gave himself a
I won't
doctorate. from a-
associate with him.
Karl Baugh gave himself a doctorate from a school that didn't exist. Not only did he not have accreditation to do it, but the school was imaginary. When they called him out on it, where is this school? He said it was in Australia because he thought they couldn't check. And then they did check. And it's not in Australia either. He just makes up degrees and gives them to himself. It's because he realized he
really
didn't
that
have the
easy?
$100 to do it what Kent Hovind
Oh,
did
yeah.
to mail off for a mail order catalog to get himself a
Typical-
doctorate.
Typical atheist, always attacking the person, appeal to authority. Oh, they don't have the education.
Excuse me,
Vessel,
the
eight
liar, the
mouths
professional
equals boat.
fraud, the fraud that Answers in Genesis called out Karl Baugh for being a fraud. You believe someone that even Answers in Genesis says, hey, we don't want this guy to make us look like we're crazy or liars. Don't listen to Karl Baugh.
I'm talking about the content. The
The
content.
main problem with the
Anyone else
content
want to
is
talk about the content?
the main problem with the content is
content
that he
is
chose
wrong.
to cherry-pick specific characters in a specific time period when they looked like they might mean what he wanted it to mean. But those characters are simplified forms of earlier characters that have nothing to do with that, don't show that connection at all. We know that the character he chose for a specific option was changed from an earlier character. And that early character doesn't look anything like what you're trying to say. That yes, it might be that there is a radical in this Chinese character that looks like a mouth or looks like this, but the earlier form of it was something completely different, and it was simplified to the radical for mouth. It doesn't mean this is the meaning behind this character. Most characters in Chinese are not going to be easily understood. Like, oh, this is what it means. It's made up of these. This one means this. There are quite a few characters that are complicated characters made up of smaller parts, and those smaller parts have meaning, and the total meaning is, it is relevant, but a lot of times it's nothing like that.
Yeah,
So-
it'd be interesting, P-Town, if you could find a apologetic book, supporting the flood from anybody that wasn't an obvious and already disproved lie. I challenge you.
The Bible.
And what's the point,
Okay.
really, P-Town? Like, why? So what if there's a flood mentioned in ancient Chinese scriptures? What about that?
Because people live near water and water occasionally floods. Incidentally, not to jump in on the comments here, but Atheist Carpenter said, I just Googled Karl Baugh. Apparently, he also has a girlfriend who lives in Canada.
No, we can't check it because she lives in Canada. Well, you can. Lilith, you can check it because you're in Canada. But I can't.
Yeah,
'cause I'm
Canada
in
is a
the
very
US.
small country.
Oh,
All right.
Canada? Yeah.
Do you
We're
know her,
talking
Lilith?
USA a lot.
Okay, let's continue.
Yeah, I see another comment.
Oh.
And I just want to say to the chat, I have more to say, so please be kind.
I think the chat loves you. Don't worry.
No, they don't. Just
Well, we're
kidding.
not talking about the trolls that pop in and out.
Love. And yeah,
I
there's
mean
the
some
regulars.
assholes, but don't worry about that.
Aaron, please.
Okay. So which comment are we on now?
Trevor,
I lost. I'm sorry, where?
Trevor, right?
Yeah.
All right, I apologize. Let's see, Bruno Zucker, Trevor and Wright. Yeah, we read that one, and then Matt White, right? So we're
No,
now
at
No,
the
no,
very
no, no,
bottom.
no, no. The very last one.
Yes.
Go down.
okay. All right, gotcha. Trevor and Wright says, why P-Town wasn't Great Britain mentioned in the Bible when that nation played a significant role in spreading Christianity around the world, if this is actually biblical?
Why wasn't it mentioned? There's some speculation that Great Britain is referenced, but it's just a guess. I think it's like the ships of Turnish, but it's just speculation.
No,
Of course,
Tarshish.
it's
Tarshish?
yeah,
What?
but it's
Hello?
No, it doesn't refer to
is it not? Is it
No.
not? Yeah, but again, it's all
Tarshish
speculation.
was a real place.
It was a real
again, I
place,
said
actually.
right. It possible. Well, I can't. Maybe I'm
Maybe
I'm quoting it
Sicilia.
wrong.
There are theories regarding it. Sardinia. Maybe
anyway,
somewhere in Spain, but it's not Britain.
Oh my god.
But
That's
anyway,
gold. You got to be a Poe, right? Like you have to be.
I literally started with it's all some people.
Tomer, what are you
it's
talking about?
speculation That there is a group of people that might have referenced the people from Great Britain. That's all. I don't.
Jesus
I don't believe it. I don't- I
visited
don't-
Britain,
Fair enough.
P-Town.
I
You
said it was
didn't know this?
speculation. I said it's not
He
in
went there with Joseph of Arimathea and founded the first Glastonbury Festival. You didn't
What
know
are you
this?
talking about right now?
About Jesus.
I have no
You're the
idea.
Jesus guy, right? So you didn't know that Jesus visited Great Britain? I'm appalled about
Come on,
the fact that you don't know about this.
Yeah, he came to the Americas too.
Yeah.
It's all that's just silliness.
It's
Okay.
Christians claiming this, so I'm inclined to agree with you.
So, yep, Tomer.
Yeah. Okay.
Where are we on that commentary?
Verse 5. Yeah, it's your fault. So, with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. So, London
guys-
comments.
You guys should remember this one. You
So
should read
London
that one again
comment.
for everyone. Oh man.
Okay, so Lundbom comments, the expression with all your heart and with all your soul is stereotyped in Deuteronomy. The heart in Hebrew psychology is not just the emotional center of the human person, it is also the seat of the mind and the will. In Hebrew psychology, the soul is the nephesh, the vitality of the individual. It is often translated as life or with the personal pronoun I. It is the breath of life. The Ugaritic cognate means throat or neck. When the body dies, the nephesh dies. There is no immortality of the soul as in Greek thought. With all your might means as much as you can. According to Ibn Ezra, Rashi's with all your possessions follows Targums. But the expression here is not to be broken into segments. It is to be taken as a totality. One is to love Yahweh with one's total being in complete devotion. The full expression appears in 2 Kings 23:25, which says that Josiah, quote, turned to Yahweh with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, end quote. An echo of the present verse. In a vassal treaty of Asarhaddon, the Assyrian king warns the vassal king about swearing to the treaty with his lips, but not, quote, with his whole heart, end quote. See verse 7.
I love God.
Mm-hmm. On verse 6, most commentators understood these words as referring to the entire Deuteronomic law. As to placing the commandments on your heart, quote unquote, Nelson writes that writing on the heart is an image of permanent attentiveness, as seen in Proverbs 3:3, 7:3, and Song of Songs 8:6, and that upon your heart suggests texts were hung around a learner's neck as an instructional aid, as seen in Proverbs 6 verses 21 to 22, or as an
because that would be a
apotropic
very invasive tattoo.
When are you going to add Jesus to your commentary, Tomer? How does
I
you
won't.
admit-
Maybe it
Or
was a
as an
necklace.
or as an apotropic amulet, Exodus 28:29. Weinfeld writes, the idea of placing words upon the heart and soul occurs in the political loyalty oath, as, for example, in the Hittite treaty of Mushili II with Kupantakal, quote, and the following word let it into the heart, let it into the soul, end quote, and in the vassal's oath of Asarhaddon, quote, an evil word you shall not put on your heart, end quote. On verse 7, impress them on your children, Lundbom comments. The importance of teaching children the commandment is so that they will come to fear Yahweh, an important Deuteronomic theme. The verb here is shanan, sharpen, as seen in Deuteronomy 32:41, which means incise or impress. In 11:19, the verb is teach, lamed, compare 4:10. Today we might say drill them into your children. Since the teaching will be oral, Tigay thinks the verb means instruct by repetition. In Syrian and Assyrian treaties, it is expected that the party to the treaty will inform his children and grandchildren.
I think there is an idea that teach them to your children could also be interpreted, like the word children could mean student as well.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
Ibn Ezra says that.
I think Rashi.
Yeah, Rashi. Yeah,
Rashi.
The name can be you are children of the Lord. Can be like the students.
I think I'll have to look that up, because I think from a cultural context that could be dangerous. I mean, if you look at the way society's going now, relying on teachers instead of parents, I think is dangerous and not biblical. I had to say it. I'll have to look that word up.
I think the idea is don't just teach your children, teach all your students.
Right. Okay.
Okay, on verse 8, a similar idea is found in Exodus 13 verses 9 and 16 and Deuteronomy 11:18. And Tigay comments,
why would you want to have your children taught by somebody who is trained in the subject? You should have the parents teach everything they don't know.
You want both, but you want to instruct your children. That's a huge aspect of being a parent.
Because you want your children to remain.
You can't rely on the culture,
and you can be an authority.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. From a religious perspective,
they got book smarts, but they ain't got no common sense.
From a religious perspective, I would think that I went to religious school and I was taught by the rabbis or the priests or whatever, and I want my children to have the same good education that I had. So wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't you keep the tradition of sending your children to be educated within your religion, not just teach them what you know? How do you know that what you know is
I'm saying that we have a responsibility to raise our kids and teach them, and then also to teach them. I don't like the word religion, but teach them God's word. Yeah, this is imperative as parents. I believe, and I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I didn't go to Christian school, but yeah, I pay an extra $1,200 or $1,300 a month to send my little one to a good school. That's a Christian school. Now I got another. I have no idea how I'm going to afford two. But
I think it's a mixed bag, right? Because sometimes you have bad parents teaching their kids bad things, and then sometimes you have just bad teachers. So it's a mixed bag, right? So I think at least what we as parents, what people should do is teach their kids how to think instead of what to think, right? Make sure they're and the thing is, even then it's difficult, right? Because if you don't know how to think, then you're not going to properly teach that, right? So the thing is there are some things you can't teach and some things you can't, right? If it comes to an expert, right, you might want to listen to the expert above your parents. My dad says a whole bunch of bullshit that isn't fucking true, and I can't rely on it. He didn't teach me anything. He tried to teach me things that are just false. But he didn't know that, right? And luckily I had schooling to kind of counteract that. But at the same time, I also had stuff in school that was at least, life lessons, right? That weren't really taught in school. And that I kind of did have to learn from my parents. So it's a mixed bag of what you should take.
I remember complaining to my mother when I was still a teenager that she only gives me two kinds of information: misinformation and disinformation. It's always something I already know, or I already know better.
This is why science is so important, because actual science, and this is also why religious believers rage so much against science, because science is actually a method of investigation. It's how to think in order to find out the truth, and would best be described as systematic doubt. Doubting a thing until it is reasonably well established and believing only in degrees in accordance with the evidence. The child just wants everything completely answered, clear 100%, and it's easy to appeal to that in a child to keep them from actually investigating, and that's unfortunate because a parent is never going to know everything their child is going to need to know. There are some things you're ignorant of. The world changes. Nobody is an expert in everything. You can't be. But learning how to ask questions, how to look for evidence, how to moderate your expectations and beliefs to the level of the degree of information you have now, those are skills that will ultimately lead you to the most truth.
But then we're
There's a
told that
huge
we need to
problem
stand
in-
by our convictions, right?
There's a
To
huge-
never change our minds, no matter how wrong we are. That's a problem.
There's a huge problem in churches where they can't answer tough questions. I grew up not in a religious home.
You
When
can't
I went
answer
to
tough
church,
questions.
when I went to church and I asked those tough questions, they just said, "You're just being a hindrance. You don't need to know. You just need to have faith."
What
But
a coincidence.
we are
Wait.
commanded to put up a defense and answer those questions, and that's a problem for so many churches. I've thought about this. I want my kids to go to public school and be taught in the secular manner. But if I decide for another reason that they continue a private Christian school and somehow I can afford it, I will take the responsibility to teach the ridiculous other side that you believe are the best I can, because I want my
You
kids to be
can't
equipped
teach it. You
to
don't
understand how to
it.
confront the enemy
Yep.
and to know both sides. Yeah.
So
You can't
moving on to
teach
the
both sides
comments.
if you don't know them.
And to come up with their own mind and make their own decision.
I
How
just
can
want
you
to
guard
confer the
yourself from just making a straw man about
Yeah.
everything else that you don't believe in?
Do you want
well,
me
and
to
it
be
is
your
interesting that-
would be
man?
to set aside your prejudices and to try your best to do an honest rendition of what the other view is. I mean, frankly,
Everything you say
if it
is
wasn't
a
for-
study in irony.
if it
especially
wasn't
when he says that the people in his church said that he was a hindrance. The comment section of this show says the same thing. Trevor and
Interestingly,
Wright,
he
because I'm not a
responds to us with the
blasphemer.
same thing that
So.
you tell us to just read the text and see that it truly says what you've read into it and have faith. And if we don't see it, then blah, 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 there's something wrong with us. That's exactly the what you were told as a child in church and rebelled against. So you've come full circle. You are now the asshole saying you should just have faith. What's your problem?
I wouldn't summarize it that way at all.
Well, you also
Okay,
make
so-
claims that are completely false, but you know.
All right, so now moving on to a comment from Bruno Zygerts, who offers $5 Canadian and says, if God wanted his message spread, why give it to the Israelites? Why not to the Egyptians or the Phoenicians or Indo-Aryans? And I guess we'll just take that
Because
as
they were
rhetorical.
literate.
Oh,
and
I
they
was sorry, I got
didn't
distracted. Was
uppity
that
and
towards
have
me?
thoughts.
Oh no.
No, it wasn't
I think the
towards
general
you.
question,
Good. Okay.
from a Jewish perspective, you could argue that God didn't want it to be spread by a powerful empire. He wanted it spread by people who would keep the law, and not necessarily spread, but like, here's a people that will do what I say. They will listen. The whole idea is they say, we will do and we will listen. We will do whatever you say, and then we will ask you what you actually want us to do. Like, he wants someone who's so obedient that they will do without asking. And that's the idea. Here are people that are going to do everything I want, and by virtue of them doing what I want, they will be a light unto the nations. And that's the idea.
Okay.
Yeah,
very
a phrase
much.
I've heard
People-
said before is "Come taste and see that God is good," and so
I
sort
did.
of like,
He's not.
yeah,
Yeah, that bit I don't think you would learn from the Jews. Like, look how good he is to his people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Look at he
Fair point.
Isn't that the prayer? Oh God, in your mercy, choose another people.
There were
Not a
400
real
years
prayer.
of
Ingersoll
hard
Yeah.
said
slavery
the Jews
that
never
he
had any
freed
luck
them
until their
from.
awful God
What are you guys talking
abandoned
about?
them.
Pardon?
Oh boy.
Then Satan616 says, P-Town, do you advocate for Hindu
Satan
parents
again.
to have Hindu taught to their children?
That's fine as long as you don't shelter them from the truth that is Christ. So I'm absolutely
Okay,
all
so
for it.
So don't
As
teach
long as
them
they have access
Hinduism.
to the Bible,
Don't
it
shelter
will
them
reign
from the lie
supreme.
that you want to believe. Don't let them
So
learn the
you're going to
truth that
expose your
they
kids
want
to
to know.
Hinduism.
In other words, yeah, that's fine if you teach them Hinduism as long as you prioritize the lies of Christianity. So don't teach them Hinduism.
To be fair,
teach them the lies of Christianity instead.
To be fair, I think he's
Test
saying
it all, and you will see that the Bible reigns supreme, and it's the truth.
Excuse me.
All right.
What
Well,
are we all doing here? How
I
did
was
we
about
all
to
get here?
I was about to almost kind of defend P Town, but no, then he said something really stupid. But the but I think it's important. Like if you can obviously, like, if you're Hindu, you teach Hinduism to your kids. Sure, that just makes sense. Of course you would. Why would you teach them anything else? So what P Town was saying before kind of sounded like he was saying, well, don't restrict them from looking into other things.
We're advocating the same thing.
Well, it sounds a
I
bit
think
like
it's
the
horrible that
I'm all
P-Town is
for
sheltering his
learning them all.
children from the truth that is Vishnu. How could you hide the love of Brahma from them? How could you deprive them of that?
It reminds me of the Christian National view of the was it the Second Amendment, which is the one freedom of religion.
No, the
No,
Second
that
Amendment
was
is
firearm.
The
the
Second
religion of
Amendment is
God.
guns.
Oh, okay, whatever. The freedom of religion thing is like, freedom of religion as long as it's Christian, even if it's, in this case, even if it's Christian Hinduism.
Yeah,
No,
and then
it's
the next
freedom for
comment
all
from
religion
Stupid Horror
and
Energy,
just Christianity
Biden Harris
reigns supreme.
2024, offers $5 and says Deuteronomy 6 summed up. You must love and fear God more than your favorite kink.
That is a quote from Stupid Horror Energy.
What if my favorite kink is blasphemy? I don't know. What are you gonna do?
You're in big trouble.
I'm sure you can find porn. I'm sure you can find porn with phylactery binding and stuff like that.
So, Tomer.
Yeah.
Where
Verse
are we on
8.
the commentary?
Verse 8.
Verse 8.
Yeah.
We're on verse 8.
Yes.
Yeah, the kinkiest
it's
verse in the
all
Bible.
your fault. Verse 8. All of you collectively, not just
I
Peter.
don't think any of this is my fault.
Yes, it is, Aaron. Verse 8. A similar idea is found in
I
Exodus
think
13.
Potown is to blame.
No, it's certainly you. So
You did invite him.
Yes, you did. You did invite him. You have interrupted me. I was mid-comment on verse 8, and then you have interrupted me. So,
Sorry.
yes, Aaron. Okay. Verse 8. A similar idea is found in Exodus 13, verses 9 and 16, and Deuteronomy 11, 18. And Tigay comments, Deuteronomy modifies the idea in two ways. In Exodus, it is the event of the Exodus, or some of its commemorative ceremonies, that must be bound, quote-unquote, to the body, which suggests that binding is meant metaphorically for remembering or cherishing them. In Deuteronomy, it is words that must be bound to the body, and the connection with writing the words on doorposts and gates in verse 9 seems to indicate that Deuteronomy means the injunction literally, although this is debated. Moreover, for Deuteronomy, it is God's commandments in general that must be bound to the body, quote-unquote, not only the Exodus or its commemorative rites. According to halakhic exegesis, selected commandments must be written on parchment and placed in leather capsules called tefillin, phylacteries, that are fastened to the arm and forehead. On verse
until someone said it was the kinkiest verse in the Bible, it had never occurred to me to link up the phylacteries with shibari, but
you should see some of the knots. Some of the knots used.
I'm maybe if Jews need to deconstruct, I mean, that wasn't my path, but it seems like there could be some fun potential for self-expression and liberation there.
Okay, verse 9. Weinfeld notes that the ancient Egyptians used to write on doorposts words of a sacred nature. Lundbom comments, earliest evidence for the fulfillment of this command comes in the Second Temple period, in the letter of Aristeas 158 and Josephus Antiquities 4 213. A mezuzah parchment, which is called the doorpost, the one you place on doorpost, measuring 6.5 centimeters by 16 centimeters, was found in Qumran Cave 4, known as 8Q4, containing writings from Deuteronomy 10 verses 10:12 to 11:21. Others were found in Qumran Cave 4. At this time, the Decalogue and other scriptural passages could be put into the mezuzot, but later it was only Deuteronomy 6 verses 4 to 9 and 11 verses 13 to 21. At various times, the mezuzot, like the
Sorry,
tefillin,
for the
were...
first one.
What?
For the first one, did you say, because you said 8Q something, but you said for that one
8Q4.
K4?
8Q4.
Okay. Maybe, okay. Gotcha. Maybe I misheard you. Okay.
Okay. At various times, the mezuzot, like the tefillin, were employed as amulets to protect a house or a city, but this drew the ire of Maimonides, who forbade the practice in Mishneh Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzah, and the Torah Scroll 5:4. Today, the mezuzah is to be affixed to the entrance of every Jewish home and to the door of every living room in the house, excluding bathrooms, storage rooms, etc. After the 6-Day War, mezuzot were affixed to the gates of the old city of Jerusalem.
I do have one comment on the mezuzah stuff. So yeah, there's stuff that's kind of was noted that was similar in Egypt, but it's also important to realize that it was even in the Mesopotamian region. So the for example, I think one that might have been used early were the Arslan Tash amulets.
I
So
mentioned them previously.
yes, you
But
have.
regarding Exodus 4,
Right, yeah.
with the
So
blood thingy. Yeah.
yeah, so Cross and Saley, who did a study on them, they actually said that they viewed them, or they described them as pagan prototypes of the mezuzah.
Mhm.
I mean, the Jews are certainly not the only people to use phylacteries. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, amulets in general is there definitely is proof that like Jewish people use them a lot more back, like especially medieval times. I think the only one that's survived is the one that you kind of put on a newborn baby's crib or buggy, and it's just like I can't remember the prayer. I think it's like a Shira Malus or something, like a song of praise.
Is it the one to
Uh,
protect against me?
I don't think it is. I think the stories that there were, maybe this one replaced it because it doesn't. I don't think this one is. I think this one's just a prayer. It's like a psalm. I don't think it contains the
Blessing
magic
for the
words
baby.
or anything. Yeah.
Okay, on verse 10, a land with large flourishing cities you did not build. Weinfeld comments, the background depicted here is the wealth of an urban society given to temptations, in particular forgetting Yahweh. Compare Nehemiah 9 verses 25 to 26, which is an elaboration of the verse here. Quote, they captured fortified cities and rich lands. They took possession of houses filled with every good thing, hewn cisterns. They ate, they were filled, they grew fat, and they rebelled. End quote. And compare Joshua 24:13, quote, I gave you a land for which you did not labor and towns which you did not build, and you have settled in them. You are enjoying vineyards and olive groves which you did not plant, end quote.
Mm-hmm.
On
I mean,
verse...
this is all important to the Christian. I know I've derailed this episode a lot, but when God, your substance comes from the Lord, and you have to remember that. And it's so easy to being choked out by the ways of the world, or to, chase money or chase things when God is good to you, and then it gets derailed. And it's your continual relying on the Lord's provision and thanking Him continually. This is what I mean by edifying into the promised land. That is becoming a mature Christian.
That is actually a doctrine that a lot of pastors, particularly megachurch pastors, will be sure to advocate and to push. It's very important that you remember that the ways of the world are temporary, that money is the root of all evil, and that greed will disconnect you from the Lord. And in a completely unrelated note, our pastor needs another jet.
Okay, on verse 11, vineyards and olive groves, Tigay comments, among the agricultural staples of the land of Israel, grapes and olives were second in importance only to cereals, compare 8:8 and 28:51. Grapes were eaten fresh or dried as raisins, or were made into grape juice and wine, which, after water, were the main drinks. Olive oil was used in eating, cooking, lightning, healing, and anointing, a necessity in hot, dry climates. The omission of cereals from this list of the land's products could be due to the fact that grapes and olives were more symbolic of richness and more characteristic of the highlands than were grains, which also grow in the lowlands. It could also be due to the fact that on their own, the Israelites could grow cereals as soon as they entered the land, whereas olive groves and vineyards require years to develop. Only existing ones could produce immediately.
And I think that's the
Right.
point that the way that I see this is like, it's like you have a dad that's giving the car keys to a brand new car to his or her son or a daughter, and saying like, look, here's this land, here's your new car, these are the rules to operate it, and if you break them, then I'll take the car from you. If you obey and you worship me, then you get to keep it.
Well, and you
Um,
can spin it too, and that's a good analogy. I like that. You also notice that when people are in perils is when they turn to God. So God will use that stuff sometimes because the sole purpose is for He wants you. It's not the worldly things that you follow me. So these next two
Absolutely.
chapters to
What's
the
more
Christian,
loving than using
there's a
people's
lot.
desperation to enslave their souls? That's truly the most loving thing.
Well, becoming a Christian is the most freeing thing that's ever happened to me. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And finally, recently, like I talk about this sometimes. I took a huge risk, left a high-paying job willfully that I willingly let go.
Well, it was the worst thing that ever happened
point
to you. You
is
just don't realize it yet.
Finally, I landed 3 large contracts recently. Finally, right before, the point is I wouldn't have been able to do these things that without believing that God is in control and praying continually. And I'm trying, and now I'm hoping that continually recognizing these and not letting it go it's not about the worldly things that you're given. It's about trusting in the Lord.
The narrative that you contrived served you
God,
in emboldened you to take a risk that paid off. Not all risks pay off, but if you have to cross a precipice, sometimes it's good to not look down and just pretend that it's a 3-foot drop, because it isn't. But if you think about it, you're fucked. So the fact that you found a specific narrative useful in getting yourself to do something, in providing the courage to take a step that ultimately paid off, and you were fortunate, that's good for you. It's not actually evidence that that narrative is true. It's evidence that it's useful, at least on those times when your gambles pay off.
I like the fact that Pete Town said this. I like the fact that Pete Town said all of this right after he said that he can spin God's infallible word. Just a side note.
Well, I was trying to give a personal testimony because I think
you said you could spin the text,
some of the
right?
things that I've been going through.
You said you could spin the text.
I'm not going to deal with I have no idea I'm not going to deal with your loaded questions, Peter.
It's what you said. People can go back and listen to it. You said
it's not a
we
loaded
can
question.
spin the text.
I just think it doesn't matter.
Guys.
What was Mark going to say?
Yeah, Tomer, keep going. It's very late.
Yeah, it is. So, verse 13, fear the Lord your God. Weinfeld comments, this expression is dominant in Deuteronomy and Deuteronomic literature for performing religious duties. The verb fear is also used in Akkadian literature for loyally serving God and king. Fear goes together with Oved, serve, halach achar, follow or go after, ahav, love, shema bekol, to hearken to Yahweh's voice, etc. Therefore, it is to be taken as following God and observing his commandments. Ben Sira, in 2 verses 16 and 17, refers to the terms ahav, love, and yara, fear, as synonyms. Philo, in On the Unchangeableness of God 60 to 64, made a distinction between the one who serves God out of love and the one who serves out of fear. Chazal at first combined the ideal of love, i.e. serving God without receiving reward, with reverence, in Hebrew mora shamayim, in Mishnah Abot 1:3. Only in late times did they sharpen the distinction between one who serves God out of love, as Abraham did, and one who, like Job, serves him out of fear, as in Mishnah Sotah 5:5. Verse 16, Nelson comments, In verse 16, the danger of forgetting is countered by remembrance of a tradition readers are expected to know, as seen in 9:22 and Exodus 17 verses 1 to 7. This reference to testing is sharpened by the threat of annihilation in verse 15. At Massah, Israel doubted Yahweh's benevolence, but at this point the danger is instead doubting Yahweh's threat. Verse 16 is the reverse of the way of Verse 16 is the reverse of the way the testing motif is used in 8 verses 2 to 6 and 16, where it is Yahweh who initiates the test, end quote. KJV translates tenasu here as tempt, which according to Lundbom is inaccurate and should be read as try or test.
Isn't this the verse that Jesus quotes from the wilderness?
I don't know.
Can you say the verse, Mark?
Yeah, ye shall not tempt the Lord your God.
Mhm.
It's what he says to
Right.
Satan in the
Oh,
wilderness.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the only occurrence of that specific phrasing. So if we look
He's-
at the context here, it certainly seems like Jesus would be taking that verse out of
Yeah,
context for whatever reason.
I'll reference the passages Matthew 4:7 and Luke 4:12.
I wonder if that's based on the Septuagint. Do not tempt your God.
It would not be the first time, oh, look at the pretty danger noodle. It would not be the first time that something in Christianity and in the gospel specifically was explicitly and obviously because the authors were only read Greek and were working off the Septuagint. You could argue the entire virgin birth contrivance is that, but it's many, many times you can see it's the Septuagint that they're working off of. And that would be another example of it.
I think
How
it's important
likely
to emphasize here that the as ye tempted him in Massah. So there's context here. It just
Right.
I think it's important to be noted. Yeah.
And what is that context? Do you guys know?
Absolutely.
It's the water, where they
Mhm.
didn't have water.
And they smote the rock.
No, that was
Right.
that was a
it's the
different.
first time.
There are two accounts of this.
Okay, yeah, I don't
It's
know.
Exodus 17:7.
Yeah, it's the time
Oh, it's when they were
that
complaining.
Could it be
He-
also the golden calf?
water slightly the wrong way, and so he didn't get to go to the promised land because God is a dick.
No, I think I
I
don't
think
know.
it's when
It's
they're
Exodus
complaining,
17:7. If you look it up, it's the water. They wanted water. I think it's the first time.
And how could that possibly be related to Jesus' story about being in the wilderness and the devil making offerings and
Well, he doesn't quote the full verse. He only quotes the beginning. So maybe.
Yeah,
I think the context
is Jesus indirectly referring to himself as God there? I'm genuinely doing a little. I don't know. I'm
It's a
genuinely doing
question.
little Bible study. I mean, because that's the way Jesus does. He doesn't actually call himself God, but he'll
it would
do that
seem
continually
actually
where
he
he's
was
inferring
saying,
it.
if I test God by jumping, I will be tempting him, saying, "Prove yourself, prove yourself." That God really does. It would be like what Abraham did, following
Yeah,
through.
it would be weird if he was saying to the devil, "Don't tempt me."
Yeah, no,
Mhm.
but whereas he'd be tempting God by saying, "Prove it, prove you're gonna catch me, prove it, dude."
I'm
Come
sorry.
on.
Sorry
Yeah,
to
keep going.
interject him. I have two more comments left. So on verse 18, do what is right and good in the Lord's sight. Lundbom writes that this is a Deuteronomic expression, sometimes without what is good, and sometimes uses what is evil in the eyes of Yahweh, as seen in 425. Now, Commentators writes that since verse 17 seems to cover all the requirements of the law, do what is right and good refers to cases of interpersonal conduct that the Torah did not mention. Rashi writes that it refers to compromises beyond what is outlined by the law.
Makes sense.
And finally, on verses 20 to 25, Nelson comments, the topic of the law, verses 1, 4 to 9 and 17, returns as the content of a ritual question, as in Exodus 13, verses 14 to 15, Joshua 4, verses 6 to 7, and 21 through 24. Instead of inquiring about some cultic issue, as in other occurrences of this genre, the questioner asks about the meaning and significance of Deuteronomy as a collection of individual laws. The child's question is answered with a sort of historical credo: slavery, deliverance, land, lawgiving, and the outcome of obedience. The law of Deuteronomy is The law of Deuteronomy is fundamentally about Yahweh's liberation of and goodwill for Israel. It is intended, a bit of phlegm. It is intended to produce good, to give life, and to put Israel in the right. Compare 16:20 and 24:13. That's it for my commentary.
Verse 20 and 21, whatever, the your son asks you, your children ask what did this mean, blah blah blah. This is kind of quoted in the Haggadah as well, in the Passover meal about the 4 sons.
The wise one says verse 20.
Yeah, because he wants to know all of the different laws and stuff.
Yeah.
This idea of remembering what God has done is so crucial. And I watch it too on the atheist side. You guys just blaspheme constantly because these people were thirsty for a little while, or they had to eat one food in the wilderness and completely forget all the things that God did. Even though I know you don't believe it happened, although you think it happened at a different time, which completely makes no sense, Lawrence. And it was written all completely not when it was written. All of this stuff, but you can't forget what God did for these people. And then to say he's entirely evil is just ignoring what's happened, right?
I mean, the main part of the story is we know
Christianity evil.
Get back to me once we get to Deuteronomy 28.
Yeah. So Minute Rice says, I had your exact experience, P-Town, except in reverse. When I finally realized that I was atheist, I found far more freedom in my life than I ever found as a Christian. And I would just, Mark, would you chime in on this one?
What part exactly? I was thinking about what I wanted to say. Could you repeat what he said?
Yeah. Well, some people have said that, and I've heard it from a number of people, that the people that run the clergy project, for example, we're talking about that when people walk away from their faith. When you walk away, when you change from one faith to another, it's just adopting a new set of lies to make believe. But when you walk away from faith entirely, then you no longer shard off into every possible alternate direction. When you walk away from faith entirely, you start looking to actual truth instead, and then everyone converges back to the one and only actual factual reality, as opposed to religious faith that wanders off in every direction. And what they've discovered is that statistically, when people walk away from faith, when they give up their religions and such, they find that they become more tolerant, more reasonable, more curious. They go back to school. They're more liberal. They're more inclusive. They just find it as an overall benefit that the best thing they ever did was give rid of their faith. I'm just wondering about your opinion on that.
Yeah, for sure. I think one way of looking at this that really just resonated with me when I heard it the first time was and this is just hypothetical, but something about like we all have 2 lives and we don't get to start living our second and final life until we realize that this is the only one. And that certainly was true for me because I felt like once I was able to kind of shred myself from all these different beliefs and weird aspects, just this weird worldview of Christianity where I'm no longer fixated upon what might be of my eternal life in heaven somewhere that's not about this, but it's about something else. But rather, this is all I got, that today could be my last day on this earth. And so that, for me, it just changed everything.
I know for me, there are so many ways I had no idea how much I was enslaved until I wasn't. And there were moments of realization and freedom for me that were earth shattering. The day I realized as a full adult in my 30s that nobody had been reading my mind every second of my life, and there was no record of it anywhere that was going to be pulled up on a big screen in front of my fucking parents, as I had believed since I was old enough to have such a concept.
I'm sorry that happened.
That is a level of liberation that I did not even, I never anticipated. I became an atheist because Christianity isn't true. It wasn't until I realized that I was able to see how incredibly evil it can be and was in my life.
Mhm.
I mean, I should
Next
say
comment.
that as a Christian, you become a bondservant. So yeah, you lose some freedom there. You're not free to just go
I mean, is
sin.
that a good thing?
Like
It is.
I can't,
You're a slave.
I can't go,
By your own
and
words.
whack off to porn. I have to be generous with my money to people. I make babies and take care of them and develop my life. I mean, it's not
And
all
then
about me
sacrifice them
anymore.
anytime your
These are things.
schizophrenia takes over.
These are
Feel free
things
to
that are not
donate
freedom to the
Aaron
ways of the
taking
world.
care of that
But you
dog
guys go
then.
ahead, enjoy, and see where it gets you. This
Yes,
this
yes.
Don't say
God-hated.
that.
Aaron is taking care of an abused dog. That's what he's doing
Yeah.
with his atheism. I'm taking care of my widowed mother. That's what I'm doing with my atheism. Feel
When-
free, by the way, to donate
When
to
things
Aaron
go bad,
so he can
when
help
things
that.
go bad, as a Christian, you rely on the Lord and you
Yeah, you
rely on His
rely on an
provision, and there's a
imaginary
certain
being.
amount of freedom with that.
Yeah.
What I was
And,
Yeah,
you,
it's
and you
called
enslave
ignorance.
yourself to this imaginary being
Mhm.
to
You could
do
find the
what you
same freedom in
pretend that it
BDSM if
wants
you found a dominatrix.
instead of what should be done. So
And
then
you-
Trevor Wright says, why do you think Christianity is necessary? Do you not value personal freedom to decide not to choose Christianity in society?
Christianity is the truth, and I value people to go and seek out the truth and
No, I agree with you
go
partly.
weigh it
I
and measure
do
it to
think
other
that people
things.
should
Go
go out
ahead.
and seek out the truth,
I
but
encourage that.
Christianity is definitely not the truth. A body of lies is not the truth. Things that you can show to be true, now you get to call it truth. If you can show the truth of it, then you can say that it's truth. But it's not truth just because you say it is. Lies do not become truth just because you call them truth.
You have to have eyes
Deviant
to see,
Outcast
ears to
says,
hear.
panel, so bummed out. I missed the Exodus debacle, or maybe not with P-Town present, given that we've all been spared all my aneurysms erupting as one, putting the Thera eruption to shame.
What's Thera eruption?
It's a volcano.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Wasn't that what the one from like 74,000 years ago? So that would be
The one that
before
wiped out half
P-Town's
the
time.
planet.
Yeah, but the one that's older than the universe, according to P-Town.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. We are over time, and I do have to go to the pound to pick up a dog that was severely injured by the pound, and the pound is refusing to take care of it. And so I'm going to have to adopt this dog to get it to a proper vet.
To save his life.
Go figure that out. So yeah, I will post later what that's going to end up costing. But it's a ridiculous debacle. Anyway, let's close. Mark would have liked to have heard from you a little bit more on this first episode. I realize, and this is not your fault. I wish we had more opportunity to hear from you on this first episode. I should have put it that way. But welcome aboard, and I hope to see you going forward.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, and then the unlucky legume offers $20 and says to help pay the vet.
Sweet.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. All right, anybody else?
No, love you all. See
Just
you
happy
Tuesday.
Thanksgiving, everybody. God bless. Praise Jesus.
Ew.